Okay, gang, welcome back to 315 Apologetics session number 2 with me. I'm glad you guys are here, and we are going to jump right into some really cool things in regard to the evidence for God. And you guys let me know if you have any questions. And I just shared my screen. Do like this, thumbs up. Can you guys see what is on my screen? You should not see anything except like the cool words and stuff. Sometimes a little extra box that I forget to take down. So hopefully you guys can see all that. It says 315. That's my logo because I always have to have a title or something for what I do. But it's from 1 Peter 3:15. Always be ready to give an answer to everyone who asks you for the reason of the hope that you have. I know all of you guys, and I know that your hope is in Jesus. You have a relationship with God. You have a relationship with Jesus, with the Father, with Son, with Holy Spirit, and you desire to not only have this personal relationship, but share it with others. So I'm hoping that this series will help you guys in your relationship with Him, with God Almighty, Lord, with Jesus Christ, with Holy Spirit, but also in your relationships with other people. Last session, we talked about what apologetics are, and it is just basically giving a defense for what you believe, why you believe it, and then figuring out what we're going to do with it. We have a lot going on this week. I mean, in this session, so I'm just going to just jump right in and try to and make sure your sound is up at some point. There will be a video, so I want you to be able to hear it. Okay, so the most foundational question a person can ask and answer for themselves is, does God exist? This is a principle that everyone you know on some level is going to deal with at some time. You don't have to be a super intellect. You don't have to be an academic, a scholar. You don't have to be a genius. You don't have to have somebody, a theologian. We are all trying to deal with this idea of why we're here and what we're supposed to do. And this concept of the existence of God is the most basic concept to all of those bigger picture things. And sometimes even if it's not, your relationships with someone can make it an important question. You can help them make it an important question. The majority of the world believes in some sort of higher power. Even those who consider themselves atheists, they have to come up with some sort of concept for why we are here, and admit to it. And it may take some different forms. And sometimes it's just simply, I don't know, and I'm okay with not knowing. I just know it's not that, whatever it is you believe. But there's a lot of disagreements on what that higher power is. So for this series, we're going to come up with a really special definition that you can use if you want to memorize it. I didn't. A being, this is what God is in this particular series right here. We're not talking about a personal God. We're just talking about this. A being who exists outside of space-time, is eternal in nature, absolute in power, all-powerful, who created from nothing the universe and all that is in it, while being distinct from the universe. In other words, not a material being, because the universe is a material thing. So all of those things are what we're referring to when I say God for this particular lesson, possibly next week too. Most of us are probably familiar with this verse. A fool says in their heart there is no God. We like to say that in our head. We've all been in church long enough to know that's one of those really good verses that if you want to call somebody a fool, or if you know somebody who says it. But what happens is it actually, that verse, that concept, actually it's a foundational principle, because what it's saying is, without looking at the context and everything, but what it's saying is it's ridiculous, it's stupid, it's foolish to not believe in this higher power. But we also have to be careful, because we can believe, because possibly we've been taught that for forever, our entire lives, or we've come into that understanding. It can actually kind of hinder our relationships with others, because we can think of them as fools. And what it may mean is we need to think of them as someone who needs evidence, and we can figure out ways to provide evidence. So I don't want us to to just have that concept or that idea, that verse in our heads, oh, you're stupid for not believing this, you're foolish. We can think that about other things, but for this, you guys are all going to have evidence. And so you're going to have opportunities to have relationships that discuss this so that you can get down to the basic understanding of what is the hindrance for someone believing in God, a higher being, not Jesus, not a personal God, just God. The existence of God may not be able to be provable with something like what we can see, what we can touch with our eyes or hands, that kind of thing. But there is evidence. This is referred to as the general revelation, refers to God having revealed himself in what he has actually created. What is here now is how he has decided to reveal himself. Of course, we have Psalm 19 that refers to that the heavens declare the glory of God, the skies. There's actually quite a few Bible verses that refer to this, that we are able to understand that he is present in the universe based on the fact that we can see stuff. We can see amazing things. And of course, my favorite thing and a whole bunch of other people's favorite thing is to go to someplace gorgeous and beautiful, like the mountains, the Rockies, to see the beautiful oceans and the waves crashing on the shore and the great expanse of the Grand Canyon and these wonderful things that show off, God's showing off this beauty. That, of course, the concept of beauty is actually an interesting idea of why we can believe in the existence of God. We will do that another time. Okay, so does God exist? The question of God's existence is very important. We talked about this a little bit last time. If God does not exist, or God does exist, it all has to do with the meaning that we have in a person has of life. What is out there is important. And it has to do with how we get meaning, how we deal with our morality, right and wrong, what gives us hope or deliverance. Will praying make a difference? Will the fact that we can rely on God for an afterlife or an eternity? And of course, for those who believe in Jesus, we talk about his blood and stripes of healing and things like that. But that's a whole nother story. But without the existence of a creator, this purpose, our intrinsic human value can cease to exist. We have to have meaning, and it especially if you are, well, not especially, but people who have been through great suffering in their life, which I think a lot of us as followers of Christ, we are on purpose dealing with people who have been through suffering. We often have been through our own sufferings, but we are also going after people who are suffering right now or who have been through suffering. We want to help them. We want to give them hope. We want to give them purpose. And a lot of times it's, if there is a God, then why did he let all this happen? We are going to deal with that in a couple of weeks. The ideas of suffering and evil and why those things exist, so to speak, and why would God allow those things to happen. But this idea of just that there is a creator, that he that there's it's the basis for the concepts that we have to then follow up on, which is why would he allow these things to happen and that kind of thing. So we have to be able to answer a lot of these questions, and different people are going to throw these at us from different directions. If God does exist, then there is a basis for hope and meaning. And there's also a basis for being able to ask why. Being able to say, why is there suffering? And then look for an answer is important. To say, okay, well, I'm going to help. Let's figure this out together. Let's figure out why God would allow evil or allow things to happen to you or for you to suffer. And walking someone through and to those answers and praying for them to get those answers and the freedom from trauma and suffering that they may be feeling, that connection with them and with God as a creator, and then God loving them and God being available to them as taking away suffering and bringing healing to their hurt. These are all important. These are all connected to why we're talking about all this. So it makes a big difference in our personal interactions and our own lives. If God does not exist, then life has no higher purpose, no meaning. It's just boom, poof, we're here, gone. That's it. And if God does exist, then there's a creator that we have to have some sort of connection with, relationship with. There's existence. We're responsible. There's a moral law. We have to figure out how we are then connected to him. I'm not answering that tonight, but it is the basis for what we're doing. Okay, so as Christians, we're also told, go to all the world, preach the gospel. And I'm very curious if anybody wants to unmute themselves at some point or right now, tell me, or just go ahead and do it. But I'm curious, has anybody had to deal with this particular question we're dealing with right now? Has anybody had a conversation with somebody, it could have been a long time ago, where they say, oh, I don't even believe in God. And you all of a sudden were like, I know I'm supposed to tell them something. I'm supposed to tell them the gospel. I'm supposed to tell them about God, but I can't think of what the answer is. Has anybody had that problem or had that happen to them?
Yes.
Did you freak out?
Well, I didn't know how to explain it to him. You know, I knew all the miracles that had happened to me since knowing the Lord, but I didn't know how to explain it to him in a way that he would accept it. And he was doing some Masonic stuff, and he thought he could go through the Masonic path. And I was like, wow, I didn't want to tell him Masonic was absolutely not the way to go, but I wasn't quite sure of the words to use, just in common language, to tell him that the faith around you, if you have faith, that's God. And I didn't know how to tell him it at that time. And it was sad because I think there was a real opportunity there to evangelize, but I don't look at myself as a big evangelist. And so I was really stuck on what to say. And I felt bad afterwards because I felt like it was a great opportunity that I may have missed.
Right. And we have a tendency to feel guilty. We can make ourselves feel guilty because of this Bible verse or some of the teachings, of you have to go out and preach the gospel. You have to tell people, and you have to memorize these verses and the Roman road and all those things, which are all good and have their purpose. But it's okay to say, I don't know. It's okay to say, I remember this video I watched and go show it to them or say, well, I'll get back to you if you can. It may be somebody you're standing in line at the grocery store with. Has anybody else had an opportunity where they say, oh, I don't even believe in God?
I got in a kind of conversation. I can't remember exactly the details, but the person ended up telling me, well, if you believe it and that's good, but I don't believe it. So we went around and around and said, well, faith, it's like, okay, it's good that you believe something. You got to believe something. So then they basically just pat me on the back and said, oh yeah, it's great that you believe, but I don't. So I didn't get anywhere with that person.
That's all right.
Sad.
Well, sometimes we have to kind of, my oldest daughter has a thing where she'll say, what is it? She'll say, what is your, oh crud, now I forgot. It's really good. But anyway, she's got these little questions that she uses to start conversations. And so she's got herself a couple little questions that she can fall back to get somebody talking, to then get them to that next place. I think it's like something like, what is your faith? Something like that. But those kind of little tricks are good if you want to start using this kind of stuff. I mean, you could say, hey, I just was paying attention to this teaching about God, why God exists. Do you think God exists? And have a couple little things. I mean, I'm going to give you over the next couple of weeks, a couple of the cosmological, the moral arguments, things like that. Just pick one and say, ooh, that's a good one. I'm going to use that one. But sometimes the stress of having to have all these answers can be a little bit much. And I certainly don't want the idea of, I'm supposed to go preaching the gospel to overwhelm you. I actually read this interesting Twitter feed a couple of days ago where someone asked the question, What is a principle that you felt made to feel really guilty about as a young Christian, but now realize it wasn't, God isn't mad at you for that kind of thing? And a lot of it, people were saying things like the purity culture stuff, like if you kiss a guy, you're going to go to hell, or, you're in trouble, or if you have sex out of marriage, you're in trouble, or go into all the world, and if you're not telling everybody you meet about the Lord, the gospel, then you're not doing it right. God's not pleased with you. It can be there can be a lot of guilt around it, and I'm just throwing this in there because I felt like that as a kid, a young person. I was, always inundated with, I felt guilty all the time for not doing something right. I just knew I was always in trouble for something. But it's okay. All that's okay. That's all right. You guys are cool. These are just information that I want you guys to have to, to defend the faith, to deal with your own doubts and other people's doubts, and then also there's another D, I can't remember it. Defeat the bad arguments. Okay, so they don't. If they say, some people say they don't believe in God. Oh, it's out there. It's something. There's something, I don't know. Oh, we're in touch. Oh, we're so close. I see him in the trees. Whatever. To me, don't just say whatever. That's what I'm saying to you guys. To many, even Christians, not too many, even Christians, the ability to believe in God means you have to give up, though, on some scientific principles. It's just a faith thing. And it's not just a faith thing. That's what I was kind of thinking when I was younger. But there's a lot of evidence. So we're going to talk about some of the evidence. Okay. So there's some
Can I share one thing, Stacie?
Yeah.
Just when you asked that question, I thought about this. There was a group of us, just a few of us, we went to dinner, and it was like the Lord wanted to speak to the waiter and had a word for him. And it was about his gifting and about different things. So we started asking him questions, and then he's like, well, no, I'm not really into that. And then as we got to talk about it, he said, well, really, that's really what was in my heart of hearts at one point. And I just sort of disregarded it. And then we were able to say, well, God knit you in your mother's womb. And it opened up a door, to talk about God and say, well, God knit those giftings in you, and they're in you. And even if, years ago you had those desires, but you feel like they're there, I believe, we believe God is saying that, maybe now is the time. And it had to do with theater and media and art and that kind of thing. And it kind of opened him up, and he's kind of like, oh, you've got the vibe or whatever, but, he was kind of hearing it from another direction. But then we were able to say, God, the Bible says God knit you together in your mother's womb, and that's a reality of God. And it was like it hit him in a real sense, because it was a word about something that had to do with him and his identity.
Right.
So I think,
yeah, and even just the scientific evidence of you are a finely tuned, thing, that there had to be something out there that cared enough to create you, to be a part of the creation of who you are. And of course, there's nothing like giving somebody a word of knowledge to leading them toward the evidence of God.
That's
right?
The key thing right there is the word.
I'm sorry. All right, I missed that. Okay, so here's some some arguments for the existence of God. The moral argument, right and wrong, and where it comes from. There has to be something that tells us what is right and what is wrong. Where did that ever come from? What's the standard? The ontological argument, because God is the kind of being who must exist, therefore he does exist. We're not really going to cover that one. A lot of good philosophy there. Cosmological argument, we're going to talk about that one tonight. That's one of my favorites. And the teleological, we're going to do that one, a little bit of that next week. Design implies a designer. The design of this universe, of course, we can, it's kind of obvious to us, right? We got verses that talk about it being knit in that he knit us in the wombs and things like that. But there's some really amazing, well, everywhere you look is amazing, but some really cool, amazing aspects of design, the design aspects of God, and what he's put right here in front of us that show us who he is. And we're going to talk about that next week, though. So tonight, cosmological argument. Woo, woo, woo. Okay, here we go. Big thinking stuff now. Okay, so there's this guy named Al-Ghazali. Forgive me if I say his name wrong, but he's been dead for a long time. He's a 12th century Muslim theologian from Persia, modern day Iran. And he was becoming concerned that there were Muslim philosophers, fellow philosophers, who were being influenced by ancient Greek philosophy to deny God's creation of the universe. The Greeks believed that the universe is beginningless. Now, we are going to, in a while, discuss worldviews. Worldviews is a great topic. I love talking about it. I love teaching about it. But and in churches, especially charismatic churches, you hear a lot about the Greek mindset and things like that. It really is a very interesting study. And some people are really good at it, understanding it. But what the Greeks did and the way they influenced Western world, even today, all the way centuries later, is just it's unbelievable. It's mind blowing. But this guy, this Muslim, said there's something wrong here with this idea that there was no beginning. And the reason this was a problem for him, you're like, the Muslim, what's the big deal? Is because Muslims are also monotheistic, just like Christians and Jews, because we all have the same beginning for God. Now, we all kind of went off in some different directions, but that we are monotheistic. That means we believe in a God who said there is, boom, a beginning. He created something and it began. That is the Muslims' teaching, and he was seeing this influence of the Greeks, and so he began to use his philosopher brain and think about, I need to explain this. We're going to explain this in a way that is simple and easy for my fellow Muslim philosophers and for my people to understand. So he studied these teachings of these philosophers, and he wrote this really cool book, The Incoherence of the Philosophers. I have not read it. In his book, he argues that the idea of a beginningless universe is absurd. The universe must have a beginning. Since nothing begins to exist without a cause, there must be a creator of the universe. This is his argument. Whatever begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist, therefore the universe has a cause. There was a beginning. This is his way of explaining this. This is called deductive reasoning. If you have a young person in your life, if you know of people who have young people in their life, whether they're your own children or grandchildren, you need to teach, we all need to teach and learn deductive reasoning, cognitive thinking, critical thinking skills, deductive reasoning skills, logic skills. Unfortunately, the more you teach and learn logic skills and deductive reasoning, the more frustrated you will be with the world and the way it works. But it is still important to understand. So here's some great deductive reasoning. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. Every one of those words is important. Everything that begins to exist has a cause. The second part of it is the universe began to exist. And the third part of it is, therefore, the universe has a cause. He had to say this because they were saying that the universe was eternal. It was without a beginning. They did not want to say that it had a cause, because that would imply what we're about to talk about, which is there had to be a causer. So they decided, and I don't know how the Greeks came up with this, but this philosophy of that there was no beginning. So this is his deductive reasoning. Here's a premise for those of you who want to study or talk about it. Premise and a conclusion. Some nice deductive reasoning there. So I got to move you guys over to this little side over here. Okay, so in recent years, this Kalam Cosmological Argument has been made better known by this philosopher, a Christian philosopher named Dr. William Lane Craig. He came into prominence in the late 70s, 80s especially, and wrote some really good books, and kind of actually got Christian philosophy back into gear again. And so he took this argument, I think he wrote his thesis on it, and took it further than just there was a beginning and there was a cause to it. He actually said there is a person, a being that caused it. The cause of the universe, because if we look at the universe, we see that it is a substance, it is something, and there's time involved. So he said that the cause of the universe, the being or the cause, has to be a non-material cause, a incredibly powerful, more powerful than any of the powers we can see or experience around us, and it has to be eternal because we have time. So there has to be something outside of time. So the cause of the universe has to be personable, and not necessarily, you know, Jesus kind of personable, but personal in the sense that it had to have choice. It had to have the ability to think and make decisions and have freedom to choose and to create the universe. It had this being had to be something that was an uncaused being, because we see cause. It had to be something that was eternal, beginningless, because we understand beginnings. Had to be something that was changeless, immaterial, timeless, spaceless, enormously powerful. It had to be a being, is what William Lane Craig postulated. And a bunch of other people said, "Ooh, you're a smart guy." And so this is called the cosmological argument. So does God exist, or is the material universe and all that is, ever was, ever will be? That's what some believe. It's just simply there. There's some really cool people who believe in multiverses and things like that. Atheists have typically said the universe is eternal, but a series of remarkable scientific discoveries just in the last 100 years or so have made this an interesting, these are all interesting things that have happened that have pushed this idea of there being a cause forward. The question is, what caused the universe to come into being? That's the basic question. And this is how it is addressed. So the scientific theories that happened were happened in the late 1800, was it late 1880 whatever's, and then we go into 1900, and we get this really brilliant guy named Einstein. Einstein starts making a whole lot of calculations, and as he's making all these calculations, he comes up with some world-changing physics theories and calculations, and he presents this one called the theory of relativity. I cannot explain it. I'm not telling you I can. I'm just going to tell you a little bit of the history of it. So he presented this theory of relativity, and everybody got super excited, and they start looking at all of these formulas and all of these theories, and they go, "Oh, this is really cool." And so these guys, Friedman, about 10 or 15 years later, Friedman and Lemaitre, something, they using his equations. Now, this is all just math stuff. This isn't anything else. It's just math stuff, which, of course, you know, that's as much as I like to deny it, it is from God. But math, with this math, they predicted that the universe is expanding. Now, because I can't explain the theory of relativity, can't really explain this, so it would be a good research project for you guys. But they used his theories, and they could tell by just the math that that things could be traced back to an original single point. And I'm like, okay, well, it's math though. I don't really get that. But Einstein was going, well, that's not really what I meant. Hold on. I don't really believe that. So you just need to like take a chill pill. But the math was there, and so he had to kind of step back and see what happened next. And then a few years later, there was this dude named Edwin Hubble. I'm sure you guys have all heard of Mr. Hubble. Astronomer Edwin Hubble measured. First of all, he got a big telescope. He got a really big one. They started making these ginormous telescopes, and he got to look through one. And as he was looking through these telescopes, he realized there were some amazing things happening. He was seeing galaxies upon galaxies upon galaxies, and that had never been seen before. And as he measured different things, which I can't explain very well, but he was able to see an expansion. He was also able to see things that had to do with this idea that Einstein and his math had said. And he also was seeing things that had to do with the red shift. It has to do with light that was happening, and this red shift, as it's called, was telling him that things are moving, and they're moving at a certain speed that they didn't know before. Little fun fact though, there was this lady named Henrietta Swan Leavitt. She was, if you've ever seen the movie Hidden Figures, you'll know about women being computers, because they weren't allowed to let the women have any brains that they would admit to. And she was actually behind the scenes. She had been working as a computer, measuring these calculations of the changes of colors, and and all of a sudden realized that the different colors had to do with distance, and he used her calculations to figure out the things that he figured out later that he got all the credit for. But let's give a thumbs up to Henrietta Swan Leavitt, who gets no credit and doesn't even have a movie yet. But anyway, I always like to have a little shout out to the ladies. 1964, there was a remnant of something called cosmic background radiation was discovered. That has to do with what they were seeing in these stars, and they were seeing colors, and that color, those colors were able to tell them things about radiation that had to do with temperature. So they were seeing things expand physically, but they were also seeing radiation, and having, because it was, progressing with their science and their nice little computers and things, they were began to figure out, wait, there's heat involved, there's temperature involved, there's movement involved, and it all seems to be it seems to be expanding. It seems to either be moving away from a central point, or it seems to be getting I think cooler, cooling down based on these colors and the radiation they were seeing. So all these discoveries realized that there had to be a single point in the finite past. Somewhere in the past, there was a point, a moment where things were had to be coming from and going to, because what they were seeing, things moving away. Is this making sense, y'all? This sort of making sense? Okay. Mm-hmm. So these discoveries, they sound like nothing to us because we've been taught them pretty much our whole lives, right? You're like, oh, I've heard of all this stuff, but it was huge, huge, huge. It was so huge. Einstein actually didn't even believe it. There's this whole big story about how he actually didn't believe it to the point where he came up with an entirely other theory to try to disprove everything that they had proved using his theories. But then eventually Hubble called him and said, hey, Einstein, you seem like a smart guy. You should come look through my cool telescope. And he did. And when he did, Einstein had to go, I may have made a mistake. He said it with his nice accent. But so anyway, these discoveries were very huge. And they became known as blah, 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 the Big Bang Theory, not the TV show that I totally love, but actually the actual thing, the Big Bang Theory, which I don't know about you guys, but I went to high school in the 80s, and I remember in the 70s, I seem to remember that as Christians, there were people going, ew, the Big Bang Theory, that's not God. And I don't really know why, because now it makes total sense. So I don't know, I was hanging around with some weird Christians. But anyway, so the Big Bang Theory is this idea that describes that the universe expanded from an initial state of an extremely high density outward and high temperature. So it had to do with temperature, and it had to do with matter all together. So it was like a firecracker, when there's an explosion, it goes poof, and then everything goes out from it, right? So that's what they're saying is the Big Bang Theory that happened in this universe. Here's a really cool quote. This guy, Steven Weinberg, he's a Nobel laureate in physics, and he says, at about 1/100th of a second, the earliest time about which we can speak with any confidence, the temperature of the universe was about 100,000 million degrees centigrade. This is much hotter than in the center of even the hottest star, so hot, in fact, that none of the components of ordinary matter, molecules, atoms, even the nuclei of atoms, could have held together. The universe was filled with light. Poof! It all happened, pow, a big bang, and God said, let there be light. Oh yeah, that's a whole nother story. Okay, so Edwin Hubble, his work showed that the universe is in a state of continual expansion, with the galaxies moving away at this really high rate of speed. To explain how the universe was first born, they extrapolated that it had to go bang, boom, that there existed a tiny point of intense heat and density, and it's known, they call it the singularity, which I totally love because I watch a ton of sci-fi movies and they always talk about the singularity, and I didn't really know what it is. And now I can watch sci-fi movies with a whole lot more brains. And outside of the singularity, there was no matter, no space, no time. That's what the scientists say, nothing. And then the singularity exploded for some reason. They're not saying what the reason is, because that would imply, those who don't believe in God, that would imply that there is someone who had a reason causing it to explode. But this then expanded the universe. Now, I am going to show you a short video of a guy who's so much smarter than me. And you may hear some of the things that I said, he said, but I stole them from him, not the other way. So make sure your sound is up, but I think you're going to enjoy this guy. And then afterward, I'll tell you a few more things about him. Okay, this is just a clip from a longer show.
But the fabulous, extraordinary discovery of modern cosmology is that the universe is not eternal, that it's not always been here, that time is not infinite in duration going all the way back. And what first made scientists aware of this was things that they were seeing through the telescopes, the dome telescopes that came on the scene in the 1920s. And this is a photograph of Edwin Hubble, for whom the Hubble telescope of today is named. Hubble began to work in astronomy at a very propitious time, right in the 1920s, as these great dome telescopes were being designed and created. And as a result of these telescopes, they could capture a great deal of light coming from the night sky. And we're able to resolve little tiny pinpricks of light that previously we couldn't make out. And before the 1920s, there was a debate among astronomers as to whether or not the Milky Way, the galaxy in which our solar system resides, was the only galaxy or not. What Hubble discovered was, first of all, that there were many galaxies in every quadrant of the sky. And I've got some photos of some, they're absolutely beautiful. There he is at his telescope having a look, and he's got Spindle Nebula that he discovers. Some of these are some of his original photographic plates, Spiral Nebula, sketches that he made of these beautiful galactic phenomena. And now we know that if you look at any quadrant of the sky in which you choose to focus, and then you magnify that, this is what's called the Hubble Deep Field, even the tiniest little quadrant is just chock full of galaxies in every direction. So it's an immense and enormous universe. That's the first thing he discovers. But the second thing is even more significant philosophically and scientifically, and that is that the galaxies, the light coming from these galaxies, is shifted in the electromagnetic spectrum, from red to violet. It's shifted in the red direction of the spectrum, indicating that the light is coming from objects that are receding, that are moving away from us very fast. Some of your viewers would probably remember the Doppler effect, or wherever it was sound. If you have a train recede from us, the pitch of the train goes down. Same thing happens with light. If an object is receding, the wavelength stretches out, and longer wavelengths correspond to the red end of the spectrum. So light that's shifted in the red direction is indicating a recessional velocity. The thing is moving away from us. And what Hubble discovered was that no matter which quadrant of the sky we look, we find galaxies that are moving away from us. And that led to an amazing, amazing conclusion, which is that the universe is expanding. And it's expanding outward in all directions. It's a kind of a spherical expansion, if you will. And I've got a way of illustrating that, if you will. Okay. And this is a simple balloon. But the idea, if every galaxy is moving away from us, and if the further away it is, the faster it's going, which is something else that Hubble discovered. The only way to make sense of that is that the universe is expanding in a spherical way like this. In other words, as you're going in the forward direction of time, the galaxies are moving further away from each other, and the universe is expanding. Okay, real simple illustration. Kind of an oval-shaped universe here. But anyway, what happens though? Think about this. What happens as you begin to back extrapolate, as the scientists say? So you begin to think about what the universe would have been like 1,000 years ago, or 100,000 years ago, or 1,000,000 years ago. You go back as far as you want, and at each step back, the universe is going to be getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller until finally you get to a point where all the matter in the universe is congealed into a single point, and that marks the beginning of the expansion, and also the beginning of the universe itself. And so, contrary to the 19th century perspective that said that the universe was eternal and self-existing and it was infinite in duration and time going back, Hubble's discovery was the first of many indicators that the universe actually had a definite beginning, in fact, a definite beginning in time. And that established now what we refer to as the finite nature of the universe. It's not infinite in time, it's finite, it has a beginning.
Next was Einstein.
All right. There we go. So that actually is a clip from a show with this guy. His name's John Ankerberg, and Stephen Meyer, Dr. Meyer, has a website that, well, I don't know if it's just his, but anyway, I'll tell you about it more at the end. But on there, he's got this show. These like 4 episodes from this guy's show that he was on, and he was talking about some really cool stuff. And he, as you can tell, he has some great, just a very great way of teaching very complex ideas. So I would really encourage you to watch that whole session, plus the other 2 other couple of ones that were from that show, because it's just got some really great information, history stuff and that kind of thing. But let's talk about the singularity again, just to make sure. I think you guys have probably got the concept, but here's a nice little illustration of this moment in time, this Big Bang moment where everything expanded out. And of course, it wasn't actually just in a straight line like in that balloon. It was more in a circle, of a sphere type of a thing. It looks like the Big Bang is the observation that the farther away galaxies are, the faster they are moving away from Earth. There is no evidence of any phenomena prior to the singularity. So so far, no science that I'm aware of, or that Dr. Stephen Meyer has told us about, says that there is anything that they can find that indicates there's any thing that existed before this singularity. Now, there is a whole bunch of people who talk about the multiverses, but and it's a very fun little thing to talk about in like the Marvel universe. There are actually physicists who believe in multiverses and some other string theories and things like that, but you still have to have a beginning or a creator for all of those things. So it still goes back to something outside of matter or outside of time, outside of power, more powerful, more timeless, more eternal, more everything, conscious even, to be able to create these things. Some really cool quotes. All the evidence we have says that the universe had a beginning. Very smart cosmological guy. This guy, astrophysicist, says the seed of everything that has happened in the universe was planted in that first instant. Every star, every planet, every living creature in the universe came into being as a result of events that were set in motion at the moment of the cosmic explosion. The universe flashed into being. We cannot find out what caused that to happen. These are not Christians, by the way. I don't think so. They may be now. So what existed before the Big Bang? What caused the Big Bang? Why is there something rather than nothing? The big problem from a naturalistic explanation, which is materialist or naturalist, is a worldview that says, that there's this eternity, that there was no beginning. It's eternal. And that explanation, they can't explain the singularity. They can't explain the Big Bang. The physical science, the physical properties, the constants in the universe don't apply if you say things are eternal, because all of the discoveries that we're making say that there was a beginning to matter, there was a beginning to space, there was a beginning to time, there was a beginning to the universe. There is nothing in any of our or some really smart scientists' experience, there's nothing that has been able to prove that something can come from nothing. There has to be a something that produces a something. that make sense? That clear as mud? Yeah. Okay, so we're back to our Kalam cosmological argument. Everything that begins to exist. Now that's it. That word right there, begins to exist. It doesn't say everything has a cause. It says everything that begins to exist has a cause. In other words, there is a beginning. The universe began to exist. Stacie began to exist. There was a cause. The stars began to exist. There was a cause. Gravity exists. Gravity is a hugely important part of physics, physicists' theories. It was a huge thing to Stephen Hawking. I don't really understand it all, but gravity and a whole bunch of other constants like the speed of light and all those kind of things. I think there's 30 of them that that they say are super important in this whole universe and how it all works. And those things existing had to have a beginning. They had to have a cause. Therefore, the universe has a cause. So this guy, this great guy, Dr. William Lane Craig, he always says his name all like that. I don't know if anybody calls him William, Bill, I don't know, but everybody I hear calls him William Lane Craig. Super smart dude. To suggest that things could just pop into being uncaused out of nothing is to quit doing serious metaphysics and to resort to magic. He's a guy that in the last, I don't know, 15 years or so, he does lots of debates. There are a bunch of them online. People no longer like to debate him because he's really good at it. But there's some really good debates that he has done with people. If you like a little bit of philosophy and if you like listening to really smart people, he's got some really good stuff that goes a little bit deeper into some of these theories and the person of a personal being causing things. He also does some really good debates that have to do with suffering and the existence of evil and suffering in the universe and things like that. So I would suggest him on YouTube. God bless YouTube. May they all get saved. It is reasonable to deduce that there was by necessity a creator of the singularity and a cause of the universe for the expansion. This cause has to have existed eternally without need for its own creator, outside of space and time, and have the power to choose to act with creative causal intention. That's what we refer to as personal. The only type of cause that meets those requirements is mind. We're not even going to call it a mind or the mind. We're just going to call it mind. An omniscient, omnipotent, disembodied mind, what we refer to as God. Hallelujah, amen. Now, what is very fun about this concept of God and this universe that we all love to live in is that God's existence explains then all of the little things that we see, what we refer to as fine tuning. You know, when you're messing with your radio and you got to get it just exactly to that right spot. Remember those days where you had to like mess with it? Well, that is exactly what's happened to our universe. And this fine tuning enables all of life to exist. I listened to a little bit more of that interview that Dr. Meyer did that I showed you, and he talks about this fine tuning. It's really interesting, and it has to do with if you had the ability, he says, to create a machine that created universes, you would go in and you would say, okay, I want the gravity to be exactly this, and I need the speed of light to be exactly this, I need the temperature and the radiation to be exactly this. That all of those things they've come up with, they realize that there's 30 of them, 30 what he called constants that have to exist that are a part of the way this universe is. And if any of them are off by I think he said a trillion points, degrees, even just a little bit. It's so crucial for every single thing to be exactly tuned to exactly the way it is that nothing would work. Either our universe would collapse in on itself or it would explode out. It would just move so fast outward that we never would have existed, or it would all have crashed in on itself immediately after that moment of Big Bang. So everything that the fine tuning that we live in, the existence, the heavens that declare the glory of the Lord, are all fine tuned to this exact point that that we exist. And even though, you know, maybe like if you want to have a discussion with somebody about it, maybe just pick one. Pick one, pick radiation, pick gravity, you know, come up with a couple little things to tell people, you know, this is amazing. Ask them, well, how do you explain this? You know, because there's some crazy stuff going on that we can even just see. I mean, gosh, the human eyeball is just like crazy enough as it is that it even works the way it does. Life in the universe exists within precise parameters, and even if it changed a little bit, there is no life. It never would have existed anyway, but it would definitely cease to exist right now. That's why we have like Thanos, you know, in the Avengers, who's going, at the snap of a finger, I'm just going to make everything cease to exist. That's what would happen if anything changed at all. There's this micro world. Of course, I love to take macro photography, which is like zeroing in on like these tiny pieces of the world, of a bee or a flower or a penny, and then there's the micro world with particles and physics, neutrons and electrons and atoms and things like that. And then of course there's the huge universe with galaxies and stars and planets that are just beyond anything we can imagine. Oh, by the way, did you see the Super Bowl commercial? Or we can all enroll to try to get on the shuttle or the flight to go around the Earth or something, space flight. It's going to be super cool. We can all sign up. Everybody sign up. Let's all go on a trip. It's going to be great. Yes, Judy, you know, you want to be in a spaceship with me. You know you do. How much fun would that be? Even the extremely precise, this guy quotes, precise electrical charges of the protons and electrons that make up atoms, the building blocks of all matter, are essential for sustaining life. If these electrical values changed even a tiny bit, life would not continue. So this fine-tuning argument, we're not going to talk about a whole lot more of it tonight, but it is just simply that the universe is designed. There has to have been a designer. It is too specific. There is no way that even the scientists, the smartest dudes on the planet right now, we cannot they cannot have figured out every single little tiny bit of tuning that has to take place for life to continue to exist. And so there has to be something outside of that is an intelligent designer. It allow the specific numbers, the tiny small amount, every single bit matters. And even the tiny, we know we've had kids, or we've been around kids, and we're just like, you know, if you mess that up, if you push that glass just a little bit more, it's going to fall off the table. Or if you do this or that, think about the amount of brains that God has to keep track of all of us doing all of those things, and all of the things that are going on in this universe, from gravity to whether or not we're going to spill the glass of milk. And just as humans, you know, what we're moms or grandmas or friends or whatever, just the amount of balls we're juggling just to keep up with just the little things we know of in the world. Just think how great God is doing at it. Although there's I wish you'd give me a few more clues about how to control some things in my own life, but but that's why I gotta spend more time in prayer, right? Anyway, next week we're going to talk a little bit more about this, these design design fun facts. We'll have lots of fun facts next week, some cool animals and some cool machines and some cool things going on in the world that has to do with design. That'll be fun for you guys to know about, also maybe to point out to people. Those of you who get to live near mountains and cool, beautiful things, or oceans or something, I'm always jealous of you. You get to see all that cool stuff. But any of these design things are important for us in our relationship with God, to be able to just say thank you, for one thing, but also to connect with Him, and to say if you're able to do these things, I know you can take care of things going on in my big crazy world. So let's connect with God, tell Him thank you for all those cool things. And we're going to talk about the moral argument as well. A very, very, actually a really important one in your having conversations with people, and also in your own life. Morality, kind of leaning on to that, suffering and things like that. But we're going to talk about that a little bit next time, unless you guys have something specific you want me to highlight. This guy, Dr. Stephen Meyer, he has a really great book, Signature in the Cell. And I would recommend, I haven't read the whole thing. I know bits of it, but, and then of course, William Lane Craig does, if you want to get into some really intense philosophy stuff, but both of them have some good stuff that will help with science and philosophy. But the Signature in the Cell and anything with Dr. Meyer is really fantastic. There's another video that Dr. Craig actually has his website. I don't think I have it listed on here. I meant to, but if you looked up William Lane Craig, like on YouTube or something, his group actually does some really cool animation videos, and they actually have one on the cosmological argument, and it's a really good animation. I almost showed it to you, but I decided to show you Dr. Myers instead. But it's really, really good, and it explains, I love animation, so it explains it really well, and it kind of goes into some of the stuff we talked about already. And then he's got a really good video on the moral argument and some other stuff. So I love animations and things that take really, really intense concepts and brings them down. The discovery.org is actually the website that Dr. Meyer has stuff on. And with either one of them, if you just look them up on YouTube, just Google their names on YouTube, search on YouTube, they've got just tons of stuff on their own pages, but then they, stuff that other people have linked, and they've just got some really good stuff that it's just interesting to have. I was listening to it on the way home a little while ago, and just turned on Dr. Meyer and just listened to his video, just his interview. It was just interesting. I like stupid stuff like that, but it would be good if you wanted to send one to somebody. The whole reason I got into all this in the first place, let me turn this off, is because I just wanted to be able to send stuff to my kids. I wanted to be able to have quick answers. And being a youth pastor and being around young people, I get texts or calls. Hey, I'm dealing with this in college, or my teacher said this, or my friend said this. What do you think? And they're not going to want to have big, long debates and discussions, but it was easier to send out some cool little videos to them, or a quick little article or something. But videos are the best and everybody loves those. And so, so there's some really great stuff out there for you guys to take a look at. And I think you're going to be surprised. It's not just about learning science and science principles and history, but as we begin to talk about these things, and then we go into worldviews, especially, you're going to begin to notice, I believe that God's going to give you opportunities to use this information with other people, to help them deal with their doubts, to help them deal with them. And I mean, just ask God to give you those opportunities to throw out a little brilliance, throw out a little stuff, to show people how smart you are. But that's not the reason why. It's so you can help people to in their relationship with God, and just in their relationship in the universe. Why are we here? We're all trying to figure it out. Are we all in like a big giant snow globe, and something's looking at us and shaking us every once in a while? I think some of you up in the Colorado, Wisconsin, you're thinking you're always in a snow globe, but we're just trying to all figure out what we're here for, and what we're going to do with all this great stuff, information that we have. And we want to be able to, and I think I know all of you guys well enough to know that you guys love to take care of other people. You want to touch other people's lives. So I want you guys to be able to do that too. So does anybody have any questions before I pray? Because I forgot to pray last time. Kathleen was going to remind me to pray because I told her to. Anybody have any questions? Nothing? Look how smart I am. Y'all have nothing to say. I don't blame you. There's a lot. Okay, so I'm going to pray. God, thank you for all these ladies, and anybody else who's going to be watching. And Father, God, I'm glad that you created this universe, and that you've given us all a purpose in it. And we ask that you show us a purpose. And I really ask, God, that you give us all opportunities to share the knowledge, talk to people about you and the evidence for who you are, and your greatness and your goodness. Give us all words of knowledge and words of and miracles and gifts to share with others, and to bless others and draw them closer to you and your love. And all these things we pray in Jesus' name. Amen. All right. I love you guys. I'm glad you guys hung out with me again. I'm always surprised and shocked when you show up. Kelly?
Thank you.
You guys are great. All right. I will see you guys
Thank you.
Next week, I will do it again next week. If y'all just keep showing up, I'll just keep doing it. I'll send y'all the link.
All right, thank you.
Bye,
Thanks,
guys.
Good.
See you later.
Yeah.
Bye. Stacie.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye, Kelly.
Good job, Stacie.